Social Security dilemma. Social Security and its continued existence is one of the most interesting and politically hot topics in political science today. So, what is it that troubles Social Security system? Why is there a dilemma or a problem in the system at all? Well, first of all, people live longer. Life expectancy has increased significantly over the last century or so. And even more importantly, people have fewer children. So in the United States today, the fertility rate is approximately 1.7 children per woman. So this means that the population is naturally below the replacement rate, and in fact, the population would be declining if it were not for immigration into the United States. And the fewer children you have, the fewer workers the society has, and therefore fewer people to pay Social Security taxes to contribute to the retirement of current retirees. So the result is you have fewer workers and more beneficiaries. So the ratio of workers to beneficiaries is declining. It has been steadily declining for a number of decades now. But what is Social Security? First of all, we have to understand that it consists of two distinct funds, the Old Age and Survivor Insurance Trust Fund and the Disability Insurance Trust Fund. And of course, it's the first one, it's the Old Age and Survivor Insurance Trust Fund that potentially poses the greatest dilemma because of the sheer number of retirees and the declining number of workers. Social Security itself was created in the mid-1930s during the Great Depression, particularly because of rampant poverty among the elderly. At the time, the elderly were the poorest age group in the country. Today, they're actually the richest age group in the country. Now, how can we address the Social Security dilemma? So the first 5 proposed fixes I took from Investopedia, and they looked into this issue in early 2016, and they sort of projected over the next 75 years or so to the year 2100. So that's a long time. And then the fix number 6 is sort of my own proposal. So one of the things we have to take from this is there is no crisis in Social Security right now, and there will be no crisis anytime in the foreseeable future. What we may see in the foreseeable future is by the year 2035, if we do nothing, then benefits would have to be reduced to approximately 75% of the current projected level. So even if we do nothing, we could still pay 75% of the current retirement rate well into the century, practically up until the end of the century. But we do not necessarily have to cut benefits, perhaps not at all, because there are these other fixes available. So one potential fix is to simply raise the Social Security tax rate that the employer and the employee pays. And I think it's feasible. I think we may see it going forward, especially if incomes continue to increase in the United States. And even though higher taxes are always unpopular, people may be willing to pay a slightly higher rate. So I think fix number 1, increase the Social Security payroll tax, is likely to take place at some point during the 21st century. The fix number 2, I think, is even more likely, and that's to raise the ceiling on which Social Security taxes must be paid. So as of 2016, the ceiling was $127,200. So that meant that anyone who earned more than that amount of money paid the same amount of money in Social Security taxes. So for example, if somebody made, let's say, $5 million a year. Let's say a movie star made, $5 million a year, made one movie and got paid $5 million in that year. That person would pay exactly as much money in Social Security taxes as the person who made $127,000 to $200,000 in that particular year. So the reason why there is this cap or ceiling on the Social Security tax rate is because when the Social Security was created, this cap was there to pacify the rich, to appease them, to the people who did not really need Social Security because they had a lot of funds of their own. So that was sort of kind of a perk to them. So you would not have to pay excessive amounts in taxes on something that you do not really need yourself, like old age benefits. Although, as you know, anyone and everyone who is over 65 and has worked over a certain number of years, I believe it's the equivalent of 10 years full time right now, is eligible for Social Security, even if they are very rich. So just removing the cap on Social Security payroll tax would solve 50% of the projected deficit up until the year 2100. So if you simply remove the cap, you solve half of the financial problem to the year 2100. Fix number 3, change the way the annual cost of living adjustments are calculated. This is harder to do, I think, than fix number 1 and fix number 2. In the early 1970s, Congress passed and President Richard Nixon signed the COLA, or Cost of Living Adjustment, for Social Security recipients. And so Social Security benefits are automatically adjusted each year to the consumer price index increases. So whenever there is inflation in any given year measured by the consumer price index, Social Security recipients automatically get a raise. Please note that this is different from the people who actually work, because people who actually work do not get automatic adjustments. You may or may not get a raise at work. If you ask for a raise, you may not get it. You may even get fired, for asking for it. But Social Security recipients are automatically entitled to an increase each year to get adjusted for inflation. Now, I say this is difficult to change because there are so many Social Security recipients, and they're so focused on their benefits, and don't forget their numbers are increasing. It would be very difficult politically to do something about this. Fix number 4, raise the full retirement age. I believe this is quite likely. So for people like myself who were born after 1960, the full retirement age is 67. And we might have to raise it. Some suggested maybe as high as 70. And we have to understand this could be quite effective. And in fact, this may be a sensible step to take as people continue to live longer. So if someone retires at 67, but let's say they live until the age of 90, so that's like 23-year retirement paid for by the United States government. That's a lot of years. And so, yes, I think that the increase in full eligibility benefits age is coming. It's probably coming in the first half of the 21st century. Now, fix number 5 is invest Social Security trust funds into the stock market. And the reason why you may want to do this is because since the mid-1960s, Social Security trust funds could only be invested in Treasury securities. And this was done to kind of increase funds to the government, to the general government fund, so the government could spend money or more money on the war in Vietnam at the time, and also on various Great Society programs, various social programs, some of which still survive in an altered form. So if you invest not entirely in government bonds, and instead you invest at least partly into the stock market over time, you get a greater rate of return. So government bonds provide a lot of stability, a lot of security. The investment is much safer because it's guaranteed by full faith and credit of the United States government. Stock market isn't. Stock market is riskier. But over time, it does produce greater returns because, not surprisingly, greater risks means greater returns. So at least partially, maybe 10% or 20% of, let's say, old age security trust fund may be invested into the stock market eventually. And finally, one of the things that we might look at is increased immigration, particularly people, let's say, between ages 17 to 35, those who do not require a lot of education, many years of education, like K through 12, because they're already grown, they would not need it. And yet they're still young enough to give you many decades of productive employment and many decades of paying taxes, including Social Security taxes. So this would require kind of a very selective and much more targeted approach to immigration than the one that the United States has been having up to now, since the mid-60s and until the end of the second decade of the 21st century, because much of the immigration policy has been haphazard, much of it has been random. For example, the diversity lottery, or green card lottery as it's popularly known, where people could simply apply and win permanent residency in the United States the same way that they would win the lottery without regard to their age qualifications. So you could possibly have immigration that is more targeted toward younger people and people perhaps who are already well educated and could earn high incomes in the United States and pay a lot of taxes. Now, there are problems with this because the pro-immigration lobby is likely to resist a targeted approach of this nature. That's number one. Number two, on the other side of the ideological spectrum, any increase in immigration is opposed. Because the United States has been receiving on average about 1.3 million immigrants, that's both legal and illegal in recent decades, about 1.3 million, suggesting another increase in immigrants when approximately 20% of the population are already first-generation immigrants could be a tough sell. And we saw that the pushback against immigration was already a factor in Donald Trump's victory in the 2016 election. So I would say that this fixed number 6 is a little bit iffy, but you never know. You never know because politically the situation can change, and who knows what the people may decide to do, what Congress may decide to do going forward. The bottom line is there's no crisis in Social Security. This is just something that we have to keep an eye on. And just as the second fix, removing the cap, would solve 50% of all our problems until 21st century, and then increasing the age slightly would fix almost all of it. So yes, changes to Social Security are coming in the 21st century. They have to be made. It's inevitable, but there isn't a crisis. So if you are a student in this class, and let's say that you're between the ages of 18 and 25, and you have parents who, let's say, in their 40s or in their 50s, and you're worried about, what's going to happen when my parents, retire. Will they have Social Security, or will they be destitute and I will have to take care of them? No, they will not be destitute. Social Security, as long as they're working, will be available to them, 20, 30 years from now. And the same, by the way, goes for you. So if you're 20 years old, Social Security should still easily be here 50 years from now. With the most minor changes, it will still definitely be here 50 years from now. So there's no crisis in Social Security.